Okay, welcome everybody to Novak's webinar series. We've been doing these webinars for a couple years now. We know they've been successful because we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and we know they've been successful because we've had a lot of great guest presenters. We've talked about a myriad of topics, including economic impact of OHVs, better interactions with our effective interactions with land managers, great trails workshops, everything from what Novak is about as an organization to what we're going to talk about tonight, which is effective grant writing. I'm really delighted to introduce our speaker tonight. It's Nikhil Narkade. He's from the Nevada OHV Commission, and he works directly with grants through the OHV Commission that are granted to OHV projects and the people who make those projects happen. So he's a great voice to have. If any of you were in Reno, Nevada for our last in-person conference, you will remember him. He's been a great friend of Novak. He does more for us than we'll ever do for him. So we're just really thankful and excited about this opportunity for you to hear from him about how to write effective grants. So with that, Nikhil, without further ado, I'll just turn it over to you and say thanks here at the beginning.
Sure. Thank you, Dwayne. Thanks everyone from Novak, Mark, Laura, Jeff for helping put this webinar series together. I know that I've benefited from attending your webinars, and I'm excited to kind of speak to this nationwide audience of OHV enthusiasts today about grant writing. And I labeled it Grant Writing 101 simply so that we can cover some of the common pitfalls of writing grants and just finding money for your OHV passion project. So my name's Nikhil Narkade. I'm the program manager here at Nevada's Department of Conservation and Natural Resources with Off-Highway Vehicles program. Some items that we'll cover today is just a little bit of background of kind of how I ended up managing these off-highway vehicle grants and how I came into this kind of off-highway vehicles recreation realm. We'll get into some of the new grant projects, what to think about when you're drafting your grant projects, some of the hurdles that you need to consider before starting, and then the real meat of the conversation today, I hope, will surround, where's the money? Trying to get that money that's available in different funding sources into your project's pocket so that you can use the money to improve OHV recreation in your backyard, figuratively speaking. And then we'll go through a number of project examples. So I have about 18 to 20 months in this position administering the OHV grants, but have been involved as a grantee for a number of years prior to me taking this position. So we'll run through some of the successful examples here in Nevada and save some time at the end for questions. But like Dwayne mentioned, please write in all of your questions as they come up. All right, so some background of the OHV program. The real goal here is to promote safe and responsible use of the Nevada's recreation opportunities and resources that we have. Really, we do this by, I guess the bread and butter is our OHV grant program. We administer grants statewide and award approximately $1 million per year to different OHV initiatives. Those initiatives can range from building trails and maintaining what's already existing, developing new plans and recreation areas, or just guiding the public into giving them education and information of where the best riding areas are in Nevada. One of the unique challenges of our state here is that there's so much public land that if you're visiting the state for, let's say, a week, we really want you to experience the real special sites that the state offers. And there's so much land in between that you can get turned around in while getting to those sites. And then a supplementary goal is to increase our OHV registration compliance. We do that through different legislative actions, which has kind of been the focus for this past year, just making the OHV registrations easier to obtain. My perspective on the pay-to-play model that a lot of states have implemented is it gives OHV recreation groups a kind of a foot up on other types of recreation because we're paying into preserving our riding areas. And we should use those OHV registration funds in the correct ways to maintain our access and maintain the quality of the riding that we have open to us. Not just for us, but for future generations as well. So a little bit about my background. I wasn't always administering grants from the paper side of things. Before this, I was involved in creating a statewide database of all the OHV trails in Nevada, and that gave me experience. Number one, it let me attend the NOVAC conferences, got me out on the dirt bike, and helped me kind of explore Nevada from a firsthand standpoint. And as things graduated, I came into this grants management role. Okay, so introducing new projects. I really like the quantitative or data-based development of projects and project planning. So what Nevada really established is they did a survey. Where do you ride? And in this survey, we asked user groups across the state that not only the locations that they like to ride, but do they like single track? Do they like double track that is rocky and like rock crawling? Or what type of OHV or off-road recreation do they enjoy the most? And that would help guide where the OHV Commission, that awards that says which projects get funding, where they should be kind of focusing the financial resources. So we started with a where do you ride survey, and that kind of told us, hey, Nevada has so much open land, so much area to ride on, but we're really looking for some like purpose-built OHV trails, something that has changing view sheds, something that has that wow factor that the Great Trails and NOVAC always refers to. So we saw that. We saw a need for single track. We saw a need for maintenance of existing trails that have been beat to, what's the term that everybody uses? Loved to death over the many years, which have caused issues like water runoff, issues like whoops forming, etc. So after we got an idea of what needs to be accomplished, we tried to tie in these projects, and that's something else that I'd recommend is tying in your OHV grant project with the needs of the OHV community, but also the hot topics that are helping drive your state or your local community's development in the future. So one item in Nevada is the economic tourism and facilitating visitation to rural areas. For that reason, we're trying to link these rural areas in with trail systems that are just adjacent to them, with the intention that if you are recreating in Nevada for a week, you recreate and stay in a tourism-friendly rural community in Nevada, and then you go recreate on the trails that are right out the doorstep. We also, just being housed in Department of Conservation, as I alluded to earlier, we're trying to create sustainable OHV trails. That means systems that receive regular maintenance, systems that focus the visitor use, and trail systems that are generally like fun to ride. They should be fun for toddlers and the top level racers alike. So in that aspect, those conservation ideals are kind of home runs when you're thinking about OHV. When you can frame your OHV project with a conservation, education, and an economic development supplement, then I think those are really home run projects when looking for grant funding. Partnerships, they attract attention. So I don't know exactly the demographic of the 48 attendees on today, but we regularly see the partnerships that are between user groups and local land managers, whether they're federal, city, or state management agencies. Those cohesive partnerships are the projects that receive funding. It's really because it's showing that your local riding community, maybe the buddies that you get together for your Sunday trail ride with, are working with the land managers to create those sustainable trail systems and those opportunities in your backyard. Really what we encourage here is that a lot of our public agencies, I mean, us as a state OHV program are no different, that we have to focus on such a large or vast swath of land in terms of the whole state. So it's really up to those private clubs, those working groups that take care of their backyard trails to come in and tell us, or tell these larger grant management agencies or land management agencies that, hey, we need money for these trails and we're willing to help you guys accomplish building these sustainable systems. And then get creative. We've seen creativity in just how partnerships are obtained, how equipment is shared, how funds are kind of matched against each other to really get your project completed. So, you know, when you're attacking grants with maybe a shotgun approach where you submit 10 grant applications, you might only be awarded 5. And of those 5, you really want to see the cohesion of the 5 different funding sources working together to create your project. Okay, so I guess what everybody's wondering is, where's the money for your local OHV project? The one that I take care of here is the state OHV registration sticker. Right now, one of my goals is to make that sticker easier to obtain. In Nevada, it's very, there's a lot of hoops to jump through before you just get your sticker. And we want to make that easy and more accessible to the number of OHV riders that recreate here. The OHV registration stickers generate a grant fund. And I mentioned earlier that the grant fund awards approximately $1 million worth of projects, $1 million worth of funds towards projects each year. And that award is completed by a 9-member governor-appointed commission. So I really I can review the grants for completeness and their accuracy and how well they kind of rank with a technical advisory team, but ultimately where the Nevada OHV funds are spent are determined by a publicly appointed commission. Okay, that's kind of where you'll draw the greatest bridge, tying in with your state's OHV sticker. That's also one of the closest pots of funding to you as an organization. You're not competing with other federal agencies, or sorry, you're not competing at a national level, you're competing at a state level. Okay, I would recommend looking at industry and outdoor recreation grants. So these large corporations are regularly putting back money into their trails. So you go out and you buy a $30,000 Polaris brand new machine. Fortunately, Polaris is putting some of those funds back into their Trails Grant program. The Yamaha Outdoor Access Initiative is similar to that. It's another grant fund that Yamaha hosts. And I've been part of projects that have received funding from both of these groups, so I would highly recommend them to those that tuned in today. So the Recreational Trails Program, that's kind of been a hot topic in the past year, probably longer than the past year. It's a recreation grant fund that is created by federal fuel taxes. So when we're going out and filling like 95, 110 octane into our machines, we're paying into this Recreational Trails Program. And that money is allotted to a variety of uses: motorized, non-motorized, education, trails, planning projects. And it's a federal grant fund, which means there's a few more hoops to jump through. It might not be as loose and accommodating as the state OHV grants. It might be a little bit more dialed in because a lot of these projects are managed by states using federal funding. And then the last grant fund that I'm reasonably familiar with and wanted to speak to is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. This is money that's generated by taxes on offshore drilling, and it's really for funding like green spaces, parks, and recreation areas within your communities. So I bring this up because there's a lot of partnerships to be had with your local parks and recreation departments to go out and build an OHV friendly recreation area. And we'll provide some examples of that in some of our grant projects here in Nevada. But a combination or a collaborative approach of finding funding within each of these different programs will kind of net your total project costs. So the way I'm looking at this is maybe you get funding for tools and equipment from your state OHV registration sticker fund. Maybe you're getting some money for gas and travel expenses covered by Yamaha Outdoor Access, and then the cost for the land for your OHV park is coming from your LWCF fund. So again, driving home that the point of partnerships and piecing out the how the funding is being requested is important. Okay, so don't forget the match. A lot of people look at grants as a way to fund their personal projects, their personal passion projects, but they don't really consider how much work it's going to take to put the grant money on the ground and have an outcome of a solid project. A lot of times people are underestimating or overlooking costs such as use of their personal equipment, costs like gas for your chainsaw, cost of sharpening your saw's chain or the blade, and just general replacements of tools, etc. I want to bring to everybody's attention here that the value of a volunteer in 2020 is $27.20 per hour. And I think that really drives home the fact that the time that you spend on a Saturday morning that's not spent writing, but is instead spent, I don't know, buffering a stream crossing or mowing down whoops, that is, while it's taken up on your free time and you're not being compensated, that your time is worth $27.20 in match to whatever grant funds you're receiving. So let's say, for example, you have a project that costs $1,000 to build, and you're applying to a grant that requires 50% match. I would recommend that you ask for $1,000 to build your project, and then you bring in 50% of matching funds in the form of these volunteer hours. Maybe those volunteer hours are out pounding stakes into the ground to plan your trail out. Maybe the volunteer hours are going door to door to let the community know about this new trails project in the area. Maybe the volunteer hours are spent administering the grant and filling out the paperwork for it. So don't overlook that $27.20 that your volunteer time is worth. Always include the cost of gas, tools, personal equipment, things like when you use your razor to go scout a trail for washouts, consider the amount of gas that razor is taking up for you to go scout the trail, and include it as funds that were used as match or funds that were used for you to do background research for this project. I guess don't overlook any costs as not valuable to your grant application, and then leverage those costs with each other, or leverage your grants with each other. Something that I mentioned on the last slide was piecemealing what you ask for from each grant. So maybe your state grant application says, as part of my larger project, I really want the state to fund a piece of trail building equipment that I can take out and build single track with. And then you're asking for time and gas money from another grant source. You want to show the grant application review team that you're not just looking for all of the money in one source. You are trying, or you're exploring all of these different resources to get your project completed. Some other items to look into are like labor cost differences. So one example of this is the value of basic volunteers, $27.20 per hour, but the value of a experienced, let's say, commercial driver's license holding equipment operator is going to be much higher than $27.20. And that equipment operator is now donating their time and their dump truck or some trail building equipment to help out your grant project. That difference in labor cost is also considered matching funds. And then the cost of equipment, like I said, tires on your OHV are getting worn down each time you take it out for your project. These are all ancillary costs that should not be overlooked. And then for some of the larger clubs, more established like 501c organizations, there's a nonprofit indirect rate that you can obtain. I don't know 100% details on this, but I do want to stress the importance of supporting your local organization. So put 10% towards your club. Say this is the total project cost is $1,000 and my club charges a 10% administrative fee. That way your club gets at least $100 back to support membership initiatives. Maybe it's t-shirts for the team. Maybe it's a barbecue at the end of the season. But we understand that a lot of like community-based organizations are coming in for these grant funds. And a lot of the times I see that club support or that club level give back is often overlooked. So I feel like nothing should be free. 10% going back to your club is at least supported here in Nevada. And it all just goes back to keeping your lights on. Nonprofit agencies have finances to track, resources, equipment to maintain, all kinds of administrative costs. And we want you guys to keep your lights on. We want to grow that through granting these funds. We want to grow those partnerships between clubs on the ground and the land managers there. All right, so let's see. Now you guys have a good understanding of how to find a grant project and where the money is for the grant projects. So now it's a kind of a cautionary slide, no pictures, nothing like that. So project qualifications, make sure that your project fits in the qualification. I don't by any chance want to tell you guys to apply for 200 grants if your project doesn't qualify for any of those grants. So for that reason, we want you to make sure that your project fits in or make it fit. Work the project, work the deliverables for your grant project into one of those categories. For example, the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Fund can only be used for 9 specific tasks, and I think they're designated by law. One of those tasks is education and outreach. Education and outreach could be anything from creating ride safe type pamphlets, tread lightly pamphlets, updating or keeping up to date your local information boards and OHV kiosks at trailheads. What I'm trying to say is that even though your grant idea might not fit specifically into those project qualifications, you better have a good reason or a good narrative of how it does fit into those qualifications. So if it doesn't fit, make it fit. If it really doesn't fit, find a grant program that it does fit into. I'm out on the Western United States, so I do stress to consider environmental clearances. Just because you want a trail built in, that's trail building's like phase 3 of a 3-phase project. Phase 1 is making sure that you can do the project and there's no hazards or no conflicts with the National Environmental Policy Act. And I think that's important, just being based in the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We do want to make sure that we are preserving the past cultural artifacts, the current natural resources, and then also preserving our current recreational resources. So making sure that those trails stay fun to ride for generations to come. Again, on private land, I don't have too much experience on projects on private land, but if you're looking for federal grant funding, you're likely going to have to clear some environmental hurdles there. And then the last one is simple but overlooked. Make sure that you have a signed agreement by both parties. Make sure the state is ready to pay your agency, or whoever the granting agency is, granting organization, needs to be set up and ready to channel funds into your organization. And that means that you need to, sometimes you need to be registered as a 501c type nonprofit organization. Nevada and our OHV grant program has no such restrictions, but there are hoops to jump through to make sure that you can receive funding. And I would highly recommend you don't start your project or spend any of that awarded funding until you have an agreement signed by both parties. The reason for that is just start and end dates. You don't want to start spending money before your agreement is active. You want to make sure that your funding can cover expenses that were incurred like at a certain date. So just word of caution there. This slide is kind of, you got a picture here. Believe it or not, it is in Nevada, northern Nevada, and you got some grass there. But you're going through rocks, so you got to kind of bob and weave through all of these hurdles. And the first one is completing the application. I guess the basic thing is ensure all your questions are answered in complete sentences, and all of the supporting documents that are requested are available. So you might be building a trailhead with, I don't know, a shade structure, some restrooms, and some trash receptacles. Seems pretty basic, but your grant application asks you for a map. Provide that map. It could be as simple as a Google Map screenshot of where that trailhead is. It could be a drawing or a map of the trailhead and how it's going to be laid out. But the take-home message here is that just because the supporting document that's requested doesn't necessarily fit in with what your grant project is, you do need to provide that supporting document. Another example would be like a signing project. Obviously, you might not know exactly where those signs are going to go, but you can provide a map of the routes along which those signs will be placed. During this while completing the application, be concise in your answers. It's kind of similar to like reviewing a resume during a job application. If we're receiving 200 applications for $1 million, the time spent on reading novels that are submitted won't always work in your favor. So try and pare down those answers to be as concise and as tied into the question that's being asked as possible. We receive a lot of grants that where the grantees are very passionate about their project, and it results in no concise answers to these questions. And then that makes it really hard to assign like a numerical grade to that application. And then again, partnerships. Every source of funding that's handing out money wants to see that their money is going towards a greater cause. So I really like seeing that, hey, we're looking for XYZ items from the OHV fund, and it's all working towards this larger plan that we have, or this partnership with land manager, another grantee, a local club, etc. But we do like to see that public-private partnership and cohesion. Okay, meet your deadlines. That should not even be a point on this slide, but it is, because I literally, just to be in fairness, I cannot accept documents that are submitted after those deadlines. And we draw those hard deadlines to see who's procrastinating on projects, who is got their kind of all their ducks in a row and submits one complete application. So that's what we're really looking at, is getting all of your project application materials in on time. And it really just goes back to, like, you don't submit a final report in pieces, you submit your final report as one folder. That's really what we're looking for. Consider your dates received versus dates mailed. I've seen a lot of people say, hey, but my application got thrown out, but it was mailed by the due date, and that doesn't count. We can't be tracking the Postal Service as well as our deadlines. Reimbursement and reporting deadlines vary by grant. So I know that there's different fiscal year ends and things like that. We just want to drive home the point that to stay on top of those, because if we're constantly receiving late reports or incorrect reporting from grantees, that that definitely affects future grant performance. And so we do definitely want to establish that positive standing. I'm not saying not positive standing in the terms of like brown nosing with your grantee, grant manager, etc. It's just keeping them aware of what's happening on the project, even if it's challenges, even if it's success. It's what I've really learned in the position is that we are giving you funding to do your project. This is your project. And so we really just like to see that that those goals are being met, and we're here to help with any of the like hurdles that are encountered. I understand that not everybody that's receiving grant funds, at least from Nevada's OHV program, are very well versed in working with these government agencies, et cetera. And that's where we're here to help. We, at the very least, will have like a contact list of all of the agencies that we can share. And then I put in pictures are worth 1,000 words. I really like seeing documented progress, kids writing the different areas of finished projects. I like seeing like the equipment going at work. It gives us, I guess, office folk a way to get out there when we can't manage to get out on the project site as well. But that being said, I do try and schedule site visits at least quarterly to different parts of the state. So we do definitely want to stay kind of hand in hand on how the project is progressing. That also gives me kind of some ammunition to use in materials when we go to do legislative actions. For example, making the OHV registration sticker easier to obtain. A lot of questions that I receive to that is like, well, what have you done with the money that you've generated so far? And having pictures to show these legislators that this is exactly where we're putting the money, that's pretty invaluable. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. All right, so if it's okay with everybody, we'll jump into a number of OHV grant projects, some items that have generated some success here in Nevada, and by all means, just shoot any questions as they arise. So the Kokopelli ATV Club is based out of Mesquite, Nevada. It's in Clark County, right there on the border of Utah and Nevada, outside St. George. So Mesquite has an ATV club, the Kokopellis, that came in, received funding to install signs along a lot of the OHV routes that exist between the southern boundary, Mesquite, and the northern community of Caliente in Lincoln County. So installing these OHV trail signs, number one, it encourages connectivity between the OHV recreation area or OHV open rec area called Gold Butte National Monument, which is heavily traveled by OHVs to see the cultural resources, the unique sandstone resources in that part of the state. And it allows users to go from Gold Butte all the way north to the Silver State OHV, I think it's a national recreation trail. And this nationally recognized trail sees very little use because it's just on the doorstep of a very rural community. So the ATV Club goes in and it's encouraging OHV tourism between these rurals. It's encouraging or it's increasing safety and awareness on these remote trails. The local sheriff's department supported this project specifically because of their calls for service out in this remote part of the Mojave Desert. And so hopefully these trail signs will allow users to cross that country safely. Okay, but they don't all have to be $70,000 multi-year projects. The local Pine Nut Mountain Trails Association receives a modest $8,000 each season to help maintain an education billboard at their local stomping grounds and host an annual OHV trail cleanup in the Pine Nut Mountains. So this is, I think I've placed it as annual. They host it twice per year. And they really just engage their community. The locals that live out there have all these cool toys. We got like a Unimog right here in the bottom corner, and they get to bring these big machines up, and they help clean up a desert dumping. It's an issue that plagues our part of the state here, or our part of the country, and it drives me crazy. But it doesn't fail that each spring and every fall, this club comes out and gets together with the community, not just OHV riders, but cleans up their trailheads. The benefits: it gives tools and equipment for the club. It gives them clean trailheads, and it engages the community. It really shows that OHV riders are out there taking care of their environment, recreating responsibly, but also cleaning up the desert from something that they weren't really involved in. The Prison Hill OHV Park. So when we talk about NOVAC, we really are drawn back to the Prison Hill OHV Park. I guess that's just because that's the active project right now. NOVAC's worked on a number of other items here in Nevada, but they were able to show that partnership with Carson City, who owns the site, and it's long been neglected. People have been going out there having bonfires. Well, let's say everybody loves bonfires. Let's say inappropriate bonfires, leaving the pallet nails in the pits, things like that. So Carson City has taken the initiative to turn it into a well-managed OHV area with a tot lot, some designated trails, clearly fenced out parking areas, so we're not crushing sagebrush or I don't know, doing donuts in the parking lot. And from seeing this need, from taking this management initiative, NOVAC stepped in to help manage the OHV grants, develop the trail plan, develop the single track, develop all of the resource management strategies. And it's really cool to see this because now the city has now we have a city-owned OHV park, something that the local community can go out and learn to ride, but also host events at, and that's what we're really want to use it as a resource for OHV development and as an example for what other communities can do around the state. It's been going on since 2018 to present. It's a huge project, but the greatest thing is that NOVAC is matching this project at 100% from funds from the Rec Trails program. So we're really taking that investment from the state registration dollar, and we're doubling it with the gas taxes that generate the Rec Trails program funding. Nevada Mapping Collaborative. This is the program that I helped kickstart and was also the kind of introduction to NOVAC. It's hosted through Great Basin Institute. It also matches at 100% with funds from the Rec Trails program, but it also received an OHV from the Yamaha Outdoor Access Initiative and some funding from the Polaris Trails grant. So it's really like it's like a melting pot for all of these grant funds. The reason it's expensive is because the project's goal is to create a statewide database of OHV trails and then generate these maps that can be geo-referenced. So when you're in the backcountry of Nevada and you don't have any service, you've got these OHV maps that are downloaded to your smart device. And they'll still show your location, points of interest, and recommended routes or designated routes. Project benefits, again, it was kind of a no-brainer to fund this because it was encouraging responsible OHV use, riding on designated trails. It's focusing the impacts to OHV areas. Again, there's so many millions of miles of routes here in Nevada that we really want to drive the OHV users to the really fun spots, the really special areas that can be accessed by these machines. And then it gives me a statewide database of OHV trails and riding locations. So while I was on the field collection side of things, I got to explore every nook and cranny in Nevada, and now I'm using that data to influence some of the trails management plans that are being drafted by our land managers. When they ask us, we don't know how many trails are in that area, I can now tell them this is exactly how many trails are in the area, and this is why it should be conserved for OHV use. Now, I understand that mapping is a hot button topic because it could also lead to trails being closed. The nice part about an OHV program managing this information is that I get to tell them, I get to tell the land manager what information they want to see out of our database. So again, that brings back the legislative perspective, is that we are using these projects for some larger goals, not just what's in the backyard. Again, OHV friendly communities, they're economic drivers. You're going to hit home runs if you can show that you're increasing tourism in rural areas. And while Nevada is doing this kind of piecemeal, or piece by piece and community by community, we're seeing a lot of success in places like City of Ely, where they have safety programs that show you how to safely ride a OHV for tailored to young kids all the way to adults, tailored from OHVs side by sides through ROVA to ATV Safety Institute classes for quads, and MSF Motorcycle Safety Foundation courses for those dirt bikes. So we're really seeing well, I guess mixed success there. I think we really need to get more people attending those courses. But we are also, they have education and signing components that do have success in showing people where to recreate their OHVs. Another club run project, and I think something, a big chunk, is the Winnemucca Dunes trailhead development. These dunes are just adjacent to a rural community, and we're really working with ATV Club, the Northern Nevada ATV Association, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Winnemucca community to get like a pristine dune riding area established on their doorstep. Okay, again, project benefits when you're looking at pitching your OHV project to a grant organization. Show them how it's going to increase visitation and tourism. Make sure that your OHV project is being used. Show them how it's going to reduce litter and conserve some of your resources. Nobody likes to roll up to a trailhead and see it trashed, or the trash is overflowing, or whatever else type of vandalism that can go on. And then improve the quality of life. I think that if a lot of, at least I'll tie it into Nevada's like mining communities. We live in a pretty brown, pretty dry desert out here, and OHVs are a way to explore that vast open space. So having some good staging areas and some good OHV rec opportunities really improves the quality of life for a lot of rural communities that don't necessarily have some, like, I don't know, amusement parks or whatever else keeps urban communities having fun. They don't have that, so they turn to OHVs, and I think that really the quality of life can be improved. I think that a lot of grant administrators or people looking at it can't really argue with these three facts. And why do we do it? We do it to improve the user experience. That's why we're investing in education through the Nevada Outdoor School. That's why we encourage the communities to come out and host cleanups, group rides, jamborees. All of that is kind of fair game. The mapping and signing is to tell the tourists where to go, where to experience what Nevada has to offer, and give them a reason to come back. Maybe check out a new trail system next time. Construction and maintenance, that I shouldn't have to explain how it improves the user experience, but I personally like riding smooth, flowy trails, rock gardens, etc. But I despise whoops. I despise poor drainage. So it's nice to have well-maintained tracks. I think that's what I had for you guys today. 45 minutes. We can save some time for questions if there are any.
Cool. Thank you, Nikhil. Again, this is Dwayne Taylor, the Executive Director of NOVAC, and just want to say thanks at the outset again. What a great presentation, and I've had the great benefit of getting to hear this before, so this is my second time, and I really, I think it took 2 times for me to get how you put it together, because it was really concise and really laid out how you can get a grant, and in my own little way of understanding it, that is, understand what projects are needed, basically understand what users are looking for, partner with the land manager, hit on hot button topics like economic development, conservation, education, etc. Couple grants together where you can, leverage them together. And then when you get all of that ready, be concise when you submit your grant application. And I think what a great story that you told. And hopefully everybody who participated tonight, got a chance to hear all of that from him. And if you didn't quite catch it, like I didn't on the first time, this, like I said, will be posted on Novac's website in the next few days, so you can listen to it again. But once again, thanks, Nikhil. And I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did and find Nikhil as cool as I do, because I really do, and just really thank him. We did have some questions come in over the private chat, so I've got a couple that I'll kick off with here. If anybody has a question that comes to mind during this last few minutes, please feel free to type it into the chat feature, and we'll do our level best to get them all answered. So one question that this is mine that I had is, Nikhil, how important is it for enthusiasts to build relationships with officials like yourself at the Land Management Agency or whoever might be providing the grant, and have that ongoing relationship? And does that impact how grants might get awarded?
Yeah, so I don't think that it's appropriate to I don't to like try and build that rapport, or that like I don't know, I use the term brown nosing, but I don't think it's appropriate to do it beforehand. We at any grant manager is going to judge the application with like a clean slate, and they should just judge it equally with all of the other applications. After you receive the grant, that's the time to start building that relationship with your grantee, or the grantor, the grant management agency, by taking them out onto the project site, showing them, the progress that's being made, asking them for their input. And that doesn't necessarily come down to my position, but it really, I forward these kinds of communications on to the specific OHV commissioner that's designated or that's appointed to represent that user interest. So, for example, if we're building an OHV ATV trail, something that's less than 50 inches wide, we'd love to come out there and see the trail while it's being built. But during that application process, it's important to build the relationship and get the land manager, the person whose land you're recreating on, get their support, get their letters of support, get their sign off saying that you could do the project on their land. And time to build a rapport with the grant manager, I think that comes a little bit later. That comes when you're looking for that second grant project, where you can say, hey, Nikhil, remember this really cool Prison Hill project that I did last year? Well, this year I want to do this. And that way I can say, oh, well, Prison Hill, all of these reports were in on time, and the project went off with success. That generates more confidence in your next grant. Right? I hope that makes sense. We don't want to be brown nosing with the grant managers before your project is awarded. Once it is, it's the right time to build that relationship.
No, I think that's an outstanding answer. Thank you. Question that came in is, how does your organization handle this, and how do you suspect other grantors do? And that is, with respect to match, when you're talking about travel, if it takes me 2.5 hours to drive to the site, do I get reimbursed for mileage grant, or can we get volunteer hours, the $27 an hour you mentioned for the time they're driving? What's your sense on how that is handled?
Yeah, so typically we clearly define where the project site starts and where the project site ends. When we issue funding for specific like trail building activities, then we're looking at reimbursing funds, I think, on a mileage basis. That's kind of a tricky question, simply because in Nevada we are taking it case by case. The second half of that question was volunteer time, and volunteer time is rarely reimbursed to drive to the project site. Your volunteer time starts when you sign in on site, ready to do the work. In order to get out to the project site, I can understand if you have to tow your bulldozer and your OHV out 2 hours to a project site, that gas mileage should be reimbursed. And I think that is a viable use of the funds. Driving to and from your project site can't be used as volunteer match, at least in Nevada. And so there is some interesting opposition or feedback from, I believe it's the California's OHV division, and they generate way more, maybe 30, 40 times more funding than we do here in Nevada. But with that extra funding, there comes more rules, and I think they have a little bit more structure in exactly when you can start claiming volunteer hours and when you can start claiming those gas reimbursements. I guess one other thing I'd like to add to that is see if you can make your project scalable. Try and break it up into phases such that if your grants committee can't award you all of the funding that you're asking for, tell them what you can do with half.
Awesome, great advice. And with respect to reimbursement for any kind of match, I think the question definitely raised the idea that that's something somebody seeking a grant should understand and maximize. And if you do get reimbursed for mileage from the grantor, make sure you remember to include it, right? Mm-hmm. So in your presentation, you mentioned numerical grades for applications. And what I want to try and ask is, in your case in Nevada, and do you suspect for other grantors, is it possible to understand beforehand how to score points? And if so, how should that impact how somebody would write their grant application?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I'm a huge supporter of transparency, especially when it comes to spending these types of fees. So everything that Nevada, our OHV program does in terms of grants and our commission is done in public meetings. So everybody is welcome to tune into those public meetings. There's opportunities to comment and bring up specific subjects with commissioners. But there's also the opportunity to listen to the deliberation before grants are awarded and the deliberation of how these grants will be scored. So every summer, this year it was in August, we hold a commission meeting to say what will be the commission's grant scoring priorities this year. And this year, I think they voted to have law enforcement as the most important I think it's billed as law enforcement and safety are the most important topics that we can cover. Number two is the conservation and the planning documents. And that's basically these grant priorities arise or they're weighted out of discussion that's had by the commission. After the commission decides that those are the priorities and the projects they'd like to see over the past year, yes, I myself and a technical advisory committee comprised of like resource specialists from the Forest Service, BLM, other grant programs. I think there's one more. Oh, and our Department of Wildlife. They all get together in one room and review the applications for things like, are they complete? Are all the supporting documents available? And how well did they answer all of the questions? The results of that discussion generates like a numerical score that can rank the projects that say, yes, project number one addresses all of the commission's priorities. It is financially responsible and it has all of the supporting documents. Therefore, we ranked it the highest and it gets a score of 100 and so on and so forth as those are ranked. The second part of the transparency there is that if a project crosses all of those lines, then you've got a reason to believe that the commission should award the funding for that project. And if the commission, for some reason, states no, they do not want to award that project, that's okay as well. But we need to provide a reason for why a highly ranked project was not awarded. And it's important that the public has that reason available to them. So yes, we publish how the grants will be scored on the OHV website before the application is live or with that application packet. And then all of our awards and when the money is actually placed on the table is all done in public meeting in the name of public transparency.
Great, thank you. And we're getting close to time here, but I kind of want to squeeze in one and a half more questions. And the half question is, what a great answer you just provided to that question. But it sounds to me like you can know what it's supposed to be, but if time permits, do you think it makes sense for people seeking grants to go to one of these transparent processes, understand what's happening before they ever write a grant, if the time allows, because then they can prepare their grant with all of that information in mind instead of just waiting to see how theirs was scored.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are here. My job here is to make sure that you fully understand the grant application for the Nevada OHV grants. So in the past couple months, I'm regularly answering my phone about specific questions related to my grant, to their grant application, and I can try and give them advice on how it could be scored or what looks favorable, what does not. But again, we're really discussing what their uh, how to fit their grant project into these 9 parameters that we can fund. And that's really what I'm giving advice on. We're as opposed to giving advice on yes, this will be funded or no, it will not. I can just help you make the strongest possible application for the project. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And one more before we close here, and that's the question is, how can you intertwine grants to build a stronger request? And this person state doesn't value grant match right now, and it seems like the other major benefit that linking the grants provides is match is the major benefit. What other benefits are there to intertwining grants to build a stronger request? And I think what the question is asking is something like how we did it in Prison Hill with using RTP funds for one portion of the project, what it was eligible for, and then the commission funds for what those funds were eligible for. But I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I like to see diverse applications just because it's nice that the OHV pot of money isn't funding the grant 100%, but it also gives you gives the grantees some diversity. It keeps them, maybe the grant year, I can't tell you how many grant applications I'm going to receive this year versus next year versus last year. And if you can break these up, then I feel like maybe one grant is not funded, but all of your matching items on another grant is funded. You can still get started on that phase of the project while saving the unfunded application for next year, where maybe you'll have some changes. Maybe you'll either refine the grant request, or there's just simply going to be less competition for the OHV grants. So that's something that we're seeing here is the first 2 years of the OHV grants, there were tons of projects coming in, and now we still have that same sustainable amount of funding, but we have to go searching out specific projects or figuring out ways to build on those projects. So the competitiveness for these grants fluctuates from year to year. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We are right at 9 o'clock Eastern, and we tried to limit these to an hour.
Okay.
Nikhil, as always, you've been very gracious with your time. I think the information you presented was well laid out and excellent. We'll be proud to put this on our website so that others can view it as well. And I hope everybody who participated got as much from this presentation as I know we did here at NOVAC, because I think you really laid out some of the really key items on how to effectively go after these grants and gave us a lot of insight. So as always, thank you. You've been a great friend of NOVAC, and we hope to continue that relationship. And not only in a relationship where we do work like we do at Prison Hill, but also in continuing to put you in front of our audience, because we think you have great things to say, and just a really good job. I want to thank you. In closing, I will say there will be a webinar in November. We haven't scheduled it yet, but keep your eyes on your emails and on the NOVAC website, and you'll see what's coming up next, and I'm sure we'll get another great presenter. And also want to remind everybody to sign up for the register for the NOVAC website. That's how you can access the recorded versions of not only this webinar, but every webinar we've done. So please do that. And just remember to stay in touch, and it can be a little difficult during these trying times with COVID and everything else going on and having to work from home, but we're going to do our level best to bring you as good information as we can through these webinars and other online formats. So with that, I just want to say thank you to Nikhil one last time, and thank you to everyone who participated. And if you have any questions, Nikhil was gracious enough to provide his contact information. And as you see on the screen, you can also reach out to all of the Novak staff at trailhead@nohvcc.org at any time, and we'll do our level best to get back to you with whatever answer we can provide. So thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and good night.
Thank you, Dwayne. Bye.